Hi there, today we are reversing a linked list on LeetCode, which is problem number 206. It is an easy problem, but it's asked in a lot of companies. So let's start. You have been given the head of a singly linked list. Singly meaning you can only traverse it in one direction because it only points to the next node. It does not point to the node before it. If it did, it would be a doubly linked list. We need to reverse the list, meaning if it starts with 1 and ends with 5, we need it to start with 5 and then end with 1. So it will be pointing to the previous node. We need to reverse the linked list. So reverse the head of the linked list, meaning just 5 in this example. All right, let's do it. So we're going to be taking the iterative approach. The first thing that we need for an iterative approach is a while loop, right? But I need something that I can iterate it with. Here, all I have is the head. Let's start with the head. Let's store it into a temporary variable so we can iterate with it. Next thing, what I need are two more variables that I can iterate it with. Now, try to understand here. If I started with 1 and I went to 2, now I want my resultant, in the resultant linked list, 2 is pointing to 1. So here if I pointed 2 to 1, this part will be done, right? This part now looks like this. But the problem is now I don't have access to two variable. All right, I can take hold of 1 and point it to nothing, but I don't have access to 2 then. So I need to store this link, this particular link, in a temporary variable. Let's do just that. So to store it in a temporary variable, I am going to take two more variables. So let's have previous so that we can, if we're on this one, we always have the list of the address of this so that we can point it back. So let's point it back to null. If you don't understand it, don't worry. After we are done writing it, we are going to iterate it graphically. I'm going to show it to you on the screen. So don't worry about it. Just be with me. We have two variables. Let's have one more variable. Let's not give it a pointer just yet because we don't know what it's going to be. It's going to change. So let's start. We are going to iterate this loop while we have this temp variable, meaning while the temp does not lead to this null right here, because this 5 is pointing to a null, right? All right. So couple of steps that we need to take here is the first step is I want to have a value of this next variable. That is the first thing that I need to do. So I want it to be, of course, what the name suggests, it is going to be the next variable, which is after temp. So if temp, we start with here, so temp is 1, it is going to be 2, that is going to be next. All right. Now I have stored 2 somewhere, so I want to break this link. So to break this link, I am going to point the next to the previous. So in this case, previous is null, which is correct because this is the head node. It should point, sorry, my bad. In the resultant, it will be a tail node, so it should point to null. So let's point to temp.next to null. So temp.next is now null. Null in this case is previous because as we put temp as the next node, now we wanted to point it to previous, so we wanted to point it to 1. All right, now the work of previous is done. Now what you see is we're taking the work out of it and then we're reassigning it. So the work of previous variable is done. So what we need to do next is reassign previous. Now if previous was 1 before, now it needs to be 2, right? So if previous was null before, it now needs to be 1. So previous was null before, now it needs to be 1. And who is pointing at 1 right now? Temp is pointing at 1, correct. So we are going to point it to temp. And the final step that we need to take is we need to point this variable, now its work is also done. We have to increment it, right? That's how this while loop will work. And who has the value? Nobody else but next. So next is already temp.next. Let's point it to next. That's it. And once we're done, now at the end, temp is going to be null. And we need one step before temp. So that was previous, correct? So we are going to return previous. So before running this, let's go through this whole step so that we are sure that it works before I put it to the test. So I have this diagram over here where we can discuss and I can try and explain to you what is happening. So I have the code right here. So we have while temp. Let's take an example. This is the example linked list. It has 4 nodes, so A, B, C, D. While temp, so while temp, let's get temp in the picture. We have 3 pointers right here. Let's get temp in the picture while we have temp. So we have initialized temp with head, if I should remind you, and we have initialized previous with null. All right. So let's see how it works. So next is equal to temp.next. All right. I will point next to temp.next. This is temp and this is temp.next. You see, it's pointing here. Okay. Temp.next is equal to previous. Now temp.next is this place. Okay. Now it needs to point to previous. So it is pointing to this place. This place will go away and it will point to previous. Previous in this case is a null. So it will point here. Previous is equal to temp. Previous is equal to temp. Let's take our previous pointer, point it to the same place that temp is pointing to. I'm going to do it like this. Okay. All right. So it's pointing to the same head node, both of them. One mistake that I did earlier was I pointed previous to this same node. So the previous should not start with head. Okay. Because when it becomes stale, you needed to point it to null. So that is why previous should always be initialized with null and not head. Just a point to remember. All right, let's go to point 3. Previous is equal to temp. Previous should be equal to temp. All right, we have done that. And then temp should be equal to next. All right, so let's increment temp. Temp should be equal to next. So this is done. Our first iteration is done. I'm going to iterate it more till I reach null. Feel free to fast forward this so that you have some time left, I guess. All right. I'm going to go through this. So next is equal to temp.next. Next is equal to temp.next. Let's move the next pointer to temp.next. So temp is here. Temp.next should be here. Then temp.next should be equal to previous. Temp.next. So temp.next should be equal to previous. Again, the same thing we did before. So let's cross this out and go to this one. All right. Previous should be equal to temp. Let's let previous back and then again increase the value of temp. Now we're going to do this one more time. All right, one more time. Next should be equal to temp.next. Temp.next should be equal to previous. Let's cross this out. Temp.next should be equal to previous. All right, and then previous should move here. And in the final case, the temp and the next variable moves here, and the temp variable moves here, and the previous variable moves here again, and we have nothing because you can't point null to this. So this is where we'll end. Actually, it will not iterate because our condition is while temp. So and whenever temp becomes null in this step, it will stop this iteration, come out of the iteration. So what we're returning is correct. We're returning previous, which is pointing to the last node. So this will be our new head node. All right. So that is what this looks like. Pretty simple. Let's see if we can get our code to run. So let's run this. It did run. Let's submit it. All right, it works. Great. That was all. Thank you.